Right. Okay. Make yourself comfortable in your chair then, and give yourself a few moments to just reflect on your posture. Try and be a little bit forwards at the beginning at least, but as always, just be careful you don't end up straining in your back. But we're trying to get a sense of our feet and our hips supporting. It's fairly clear with your hips because they're on the chair. Not quite so obvious with your feet. You need to just to bring the weight a little bit forwards. Just feel that sense of your legs kind of filling up a little bit. A couple of slow, gentle breaths. And then rubbing your hands together. And tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. The other side. Your belly. And your legs. Sit back a little bit, have your feet out, dropping back into the chair. And it's really the dropping thing that we want to notice first, how when we're comfortable in the chair, we are able to just let go a little bit, get that feeling of releasing. Again, take a couple of slow breaths. Letting your attention come in to your body. And a good point to focus on at this stage is those areas in contact with the chair. So somewhere in your back, lower back, hips, buttocks, that kind of area, depending on the exact chair that you're using, its shape and its size. Because those are the areas that we want to get that feeling of dropping through. It's almost like if you imagine a plug in a sink, you take the plug out and eventually the rest of the water drains away. So it's a sense in which maybe, for instance, if you think of your rib cage and the sternum, rather than the sense of it pushing outwards, it's almost like your sternum, the middle of the rib cage, is flowing into that area in your back that is against the chair and sort of through that area into the chair. And these are all qualities that we want to try and find in one way or another in the upright stances, whether seated or standing. So familiarizing yourself with the idea and how it feels to you. You might even want to put a label on it in one way or another, or have a particular image for it. Is actually something that is useful to take with you into the upright stances from this one. So coming to the upright position, you don't have to be a long way forwards, and remember you're not stuck in that position, but you do want your feet below your hips so that as you go forward, there's a sort of below your knees, I beg your pardon, not below your hips. So as you go forwards, there's a sense in which more of your weight can flow down through. It's a fairly clear passage. And as your hips drop, so there's space for your rib cage to drop. As your rib cage drops, there's space for your shoulders to drop. What we have left is this feeling in the upper body of being supported both from the back but also from deeper within our bodies. And then think of the skeleton and surrounding area, for instance. So there's this sort of two-way movement, a downward movement of a lot of the soft tissue, and an upward movement through, say, the center of your body or your back. And then slowly turning your head. So one of the great challenges is to maintain this posture and its qualities as we begin to move. As soon as you introduce the idea of movement, of change, there's the potential disruption there. The image I sometimes offer to people with that is, if you get on a train and all the seats are taken, so you're standing there, you think, well, that's okay, I haven't got far to go. I'll just stand there. You feel quite fine till the train starts, and then suddenly, as soon as there's that unpredictability, that's when we maybe hold on to one of the rails or something like that. So how we move, what factors are involved in creating the movement, how far the movement should go, it becomes an important question. Hands in front of the shoulders. As a general principle, I would say start off small and gradually increase the range of movement without ever getting to a point where you feel that you're straining. Try and feel well out in your body. You register the movement. And in particular with this one, chest and upper back to begin with. But also, as your elbows come up, there's a lengthening through the sides of the body. We find that in movements like dragon plucks the stars from the sky, going down, back the other way. And of course, in time, we can push down through our hips and our feet, get that sense of an expansion upward, and bring that into the movement as well. So the simplest of movements can actually help us to begin to create these connections, or begin to use the connections that are already there. Hands down to your sides. The ability to do that will depend, in part at least, on the movement. Some movements will come more naturally and more easily to you. It's normal, I think. We get a glimpse of these connections, and gradually they become more usable. And then winding around. And back the other way. So when one part of your body is in motion, your whole body is in one way or another part of that movement, part of that motion, whether it be through actively moving some part of the body, or else just that part of the body involved in stabilizing the body. And using the center part of your body, this is the area between hips and waist that is going to provide the link between lower body and upper body as we think of them. And our main concern at the moment is between hips and feet, feeling the weight move forwards and then back. So the movement of our weight is a very, very important source of movement, of energy. As is the downward movement leading to the upward movement that I mentioned earlier. and then turn in towards one leg, turning in the center of the body. So this area, the center, a bit like the steering wheel of a car, really, or the handlebars of a bike, things that you use to help you to navigate around the different patterns. Then in the other direction, and then circling around, combining the turning and the forward and backward transfer of your weight. You're creating the circle from the center of your body. So the movement in your spine, your ribs, and the bones of your shoulders. Not big movement. You don't, obviously the skeleton's not going to get up and walk away. Just slight movements from which the rest of the movement sort of gradually radiates out, like throwing a pebble into a pond and watching the ripples disperse. Go back the other way. And come back to your central position, step out with one foot, heel, toes. Get used to this planting of your foot. On the other side. See if you can get a feeling of your hips settling a bit more as you move your foot. And bring your feet back to hand. Your hands drop down, turn them palm forwards, and then going forwards and rotating at the same time. So combining two of the movements that we've just done. Bird folds its wings. Fisherman cast the net. You go back, and as you settle into your hips, your arms swing behind and going forwards as you settle into your feet. Your hands swing forwards. Most of the time, you're pulling on your arms and your hands when you just swing out of it. Following a natural curve, because obviously your arm's going to drop down more here, and then it would tend to rise up, it will drop down here, and then it will rise up. And the movement that happens once we've settled in our feet and in our hips, so as your arms swing through, is a combination of the momentum that builds up with the swing, but also small changes through back, chest, and well, wherever you notice them. So for instance, I notice here, this area here where the shoulder meets my chest, I go forward, my arms behind, but now that area contracts. And then there's a similar area in the back of the shoulder where the same thing happens. So we begin to realize that the different stages of the movement are very much interconnected. whether it's a contracting or an expanding stage. It will always sort of like segue into an expanding movement if it's contracting, contracting movement if it's already expanded, and so on. Do one more of these, and then rolling the ball. And then this time as your arms start to draw over, turn them palm in, draw your elbows apart. So chest open, contraction between the shoulder blades, and then chest contract, doing the openness again, upper part of the back. Once again, expansion produces contraction. Contraction produces expansion. Because as we go back here, the fact the chest is opening is loading the tissue there to contract, like you might pull out an elastic band. Same thing in your back as you go forwards here. One more time, coming back, hands now dropping in front of your hips, pushing wave. Again, there's that natural curve up. I'm not lifting my hands. I'm not doing this and then pushing forward or pushing forward and then doing this. If you look at the shape of my arm, it remains fairly constant. I turn my hand, but if I don't turn my hand, for instance, then it will go out and back. And it's like the movement, the wave-like movement from my hip pushes into my elbow really, and pushes my hand forward. If I do this, you see, it would tend to go up. I'm not doing anything at all with my shoulder. I'm using my other hand to move this. So we don't try lift the hands, but we create a shape and a pattern of movement that causes them to rise up. One more time. You bring your hands down, make them into the loose fist and come back. Elbows stay a little bit in front of your hips. So your arm does actually straighten now. So with the previous exercise, we maintained this shape and that meant that the arm came up. With this one, we deliberately open the angle of our elbow and that pushes the hand straight forward. When you come back, don't put your elbow right back because you'll break the connection with your shoulder. And what you want to feel is that your hips are pushing your shoulders forwards, the shoulders push your elbow forwards, and you can't really do that from that position. And then Turning your hands out, winding back, finishing basically the same movement as pushing wave. Here, chest opens and closes, hands come into position, and push. One more time. About turning your hands palm down, turn, tilt forwards, hips going back, turn again horizontally and let your hips pull you back to the up. Change direction. And as your shoulders go forward, once again, there's a push on the elbow, which extends out and then contracts in. But never locking, that's important. You're polishing the table. One more in each direction. Come back to the upright position. Turn your hands palm up. And with just a very gentle, very subtle feeling of pushing down through your feet, through your hips. Or if you prefer, subtle feeling here of expansion, so that the expansion pushes downwards again through hips and feet, but also pushes up. Just lifting the ball and pressing down. Band in, contracting, a nice steady rhythm settling in. Changing after this one to the wild goose, same idea, an expansion, either upwards from the ground and the contraction back in, or more subtly, an expansion through the center of your body, expanding in all directions. So either way, the key thing is fulfilled here, which is as our arms extend out, as our body in general expands and so on and so forth, there's an automatic almost renewal of that connection to the ground, the root. One more time. Going forwards. Just crossing in front of your knees, sit back, heart in the clouds. So we can come up with various ideas, images, models for what's going on in these exercises. No one idea or model is ever going to be complete. So some may actually not work for you at all. This is quite normal in my experience. So we begin to become aware of what the useful elements are to us at any particular time. Now, letting your hands drop. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. We may want to think of technical details about positioning the feet and hips, and that's always important. There's a really good way to ground things. It's like when we come into our posture in that way, with that sense of viewing, observing our posture. We just get a clearer sense of what is beginning to go on in the body. What are the fundamental movements, the ones that seem to be common in one way or another to all, or most, if not all, the movements? So these are the things that you would want to begin to cultivate. One more on each side. And then both hands pushing in two directions. But from the ground upwards, feet are important because they're one of our most significant contact with the ground beneath, particularly when we're standing. That also, of course, would involve your hips in the seated position. Legs as the transmitter connection between the feet and the rest of the body. So the weight moving perhaps, or that slight sense of expansion up from the ground and expanding the stages of the movements. One more time. And then changing. And as you become a bit more proficient at the exercises, one little thing, one phrase, one thing observed can become the basis for quite significant changes over a period of time. Not always. So don't overlook the significance of these smaller changes within the body. One more time. And part in the clouds. Hands in front of the hips. Now with this one, you sit back into your hips and then push up. Slightly different to the previous two. One more time. And then dragon plucks the stars from the sky. See if you can just make use of that connection through your foot, through your hips, to again provide that little bit of a push up. One more. And then bringing your hands around in front of you and pushing in two directions. a little bit above your head. And then back down. Take your time with the return in movement. And as we get into this little set, just remind yourself that image that I offered a few moments ago. Don't be like a ball in the middle of your body. And as you drop down, the weight of your head pressing down through your upper body and so on, that ball a little bit compressed. And then it starts to expand outwards. And so, as always, it will expand in both directions. Well, both directions, more than two directions, aren't there? Principally sort of downwards and upwards are the two that we're interested in right now. So we can see when we've reached a point of fullness in the extension, that being the point that we can get to without straining, gravity takes over and pulls us downwards and inwards. And the more we do that, the more we squeeze on that ball, and then the expanding movement pushes us back out again. To receive the pull of gravity bringing us down. So they're not separate, they're two parts of the same whole. This time, put one foot out just on the heel now, so toes up, scooping the sea, looking at the sky. Hips dropping back into your chair, bringing you back up. It's like imagine somebody sort of taking hold of the top of your trousers, and as you go down, they're pulling, and they pull you back. I'm exaggerating this now, but notice how that slight tends to only be felt, not seen. And as you come back, hips dropping down, drawing your shoulders up, your arms following that movement. What you may find, and you need to be careful with this, is that at this point, you get a sense of just dropping back a little bit, almost like that line there, we're beginning to straighten. But remember, you've got to come back. So don't just go back here like that, because now you've got to struggle. It's a very subtle element. And depending on your back, you might not be comfortable doing that. And then changing, hands fisted. I generally find when I'm introduced to a new movement or a new aspect of a familiar movement, it takes a little while for it to sort of sink in and to find out how it's done. With that or with any other aspect of Tai Chi, be patient with that. One more time. Change over. And then grasping the tiger's ears. And bring your foot back. We're going to do the move part the wild horse's mane, and we're going to go from that to the seated version of White Crane Sorry, white 8 offers fruit. Some of you have done this a little bit. It's probably still a bit confusing. And again, what you do is each time we do it, and I'll try and do it more regularly in these classes, but each time you do it, you get a little bit more familiar. You begin to learn this. You probably, if you think back to when you first did Part of the Wild Horse's Mane, probably felt all over the place. Now it can feel quite smooth. And in any case, Part of the Wild Horse's Mane is a key component of white 8. But we'll start with Part of the Wild Horse's Mane. So back into your right hip, hold the ball with your right hand on top. You're going to go forwards into your left leg, extending out and coming back to hold the ball. Turn to move across. So do one more of these. This time start with Part of the Wild Horse's Mane, but don't move the weight back. But think about this open chest here and let that contract again and bring your right hand across and drop your left elbow down. So you almost touch the elbow there. And then you move back and it's like you're pulling your fingers out of mud. They come over and down. You sink into the right hip, turn your hands palm in, and as though you're holding the ball, you then move forwards again. Now we come back again into the right hip, drop the left hand down and you're holding the ball and you move across. So Part of the Wild Horse's Mane, chest opens, and then the weight doesn't move, but the chest closes. Elbow drops and the hands come to the fingers. You're pulling your fingers out of mud and then push through. So one of the lovely things about this is that we see the significance of the weight. You're going back into your left hip, cross into your right hip, and then forward into your left leg. But now we stay there, and the next part of the movement is really the chest closing, and you sink into your hip a bit more, you'll find after a while, and that brings the hands across, and then coming back and push forward. So you might want to cast your mind back to something like, say, pigeon spreads its wings. You know, in pigeon spreads its wings, we don't do it like this, we do it like this, don't we? But the chest opens and then the chest closes, and that helps to bring the hands back together. So you've got the basic drive, the basic energy to do the movement. And you then have to think about the actual way the movement happens, the actual shape. Your left arm stays more or less in position, just the elbow dropping. So this is a set of movements that's a little bit more intricate than the simple exercises, of course. And yet, because of that, helps us to really investigate and to work with very subtle elements of what's going on in the body. And it's very fluid. So, for instance, one thing that I do sometimes, and I'll exaggerate this so you can see it, I'm turning. As my chest closes, I turn to the front a bit. Now, when I go back, I turn back to the corner. So I'm still using the center of my body. I'll show you that again, but it is very exaggerated. These things are often more felt than seen. I turn to your right. I turn to the front as the chest contracts. I come back. I turn to the right again, the right diagonal, and go forwards. And this shouldn't be set in stone because sometimes there may be different ways, different pathways. A little bit of exploration starts to take place here. Once you've got the set of movements, and as always, sometimes it's much easier or much more obvious, I wouldn't say easy at all, to discern these subtle changes in the body when they're sort of laid alongside each other. We can feel a slight change in direction. The contrast between chest and upper back. So on and so forth. Let's do this one more time on each side. So this is the exercise white ape offers food. So part of the value of doing an exercise like that, a more complex exercise, isn't necessarily that you're going to become kind of really proficient at it, although that's what tends to happen. And of course, that's very satisfying, and you feel that it's an interesting movement, one that can really engage your attention. But that engagement of your attention is actually one of the key things, because that awareness of subtle changes in the body, how we can do something that can look quite kind of big, but with relatively little effort or with a different kind of effort, really helps us in our movements. That kind of awareness is one of the great benefits of the practice of Tai Chi that gradually accumulates for us. So now, once again, rubbing your hands together, tapping over your face. Over your head and neck, down to one shoulder and your arm. And the other side, half your chest. Your belly and your legs. Push your heels up, pumping the legs. And then circle around to the movement in your hips. And then back the other way. Good, now stand. So because we did wide tape, of course, we've got less standing time. But we've got the advantage of a slightly more trained awareness. So stand with your feet hip width apart, your weight forwards. And one of the very subtle changes, of course, that we notice is this one where we go from a stiffer way of standing to settling. It's only a small movement, but it has quite significant effects on the body. Sinking down, and we'll do these three movements as a sequence, rooting down. Again, just noticing the subtle changes. And then wild goose. And parting the clouds. Do one more round. Good. Now, 1 foot forwards, transferring your weight. So if we can bring that trained awareness to something much simpler, like the transfer of the weight, which we know how significant that is, we may begin to notice things that can help us to improve this. And so it could be something simple like just suddenly realizing, oh, there's a tightness there, or oh, if I do this, then this can happen, and so on and so forth. It's hard to say exactly what it's going to be for any individual because we're observing this. It's like going into your garden and thinking, maybe if I prune the rose bush like this or something like that. And gradually, therefore, we refine, we cultivate these movements, and we know how significant this weight transfer is. Raising your toes and your heel, trying to do this without our hips coming up. Hips should be sinking down. So again, if you begin to notice, say in white tape, those subtle little turns, then you realize, oh, actually, it might not, I might just need to do one little thing. Move your weight back. And instead of thinking I've got to raise the toes, just close the angle of the foot to the leg. And then here, bend the knee a little bit. Sometimes quite a small movement can make a difference. More of the weight going into the leg, and then we can begin taking the step. So sometimes if there's something we're trying to do, it might require big change. But quite often, if we can see where the source of those movements are, the source of those problems, if they're a problem, then quite often quite a small change is going to make the difference. And on the other side, of course, that can work in both directions. Get one small thing wrong, everything can go wrong. But again, that trained awareness helps us there to recognize what is useful and what isn't useful, and to help us begin to sort of lean towards the useful, as it were. And then raising toes and heel. And then step in. Change direction if you haven't done already. To have your right foot forward, we're going to go straight into the figure of 8 movement. With the infinity sign, if you prefer that. But again, don't strain or struggle for the movement. Now think about it. When your arms go up here, if I do this, then this is like dragon plucks the stars from the sky, and I've got all that potential for expansion through the body. So this is actually less of a movement than this. So we can find ways to maintain that smoothness of flow, that connection through the body, and that sense of the whole body moving as one unit, the energy flowing as one unit. So go into your back foot, turn, feel the expansion through the left side of your body, go forwards and turn. And as you turn, the expansion more in the right side of the body. With the other foot forwards, don't forget to check your stance, correct length and the correct width. Turn my front foot out a little bit, and now I'm going to step forward, bring your rear foot in, or the opposite way around if you're going back. Start off with the force. Hips dropping back, and with that feeling from the chair, your hips dropping into the chair, how that brought your head and shoulders up. So to maintain the upright stance, don't strain in your back. Let gravity do the work by drawing your hips down. I'm going to change direction. Remember, this is an exercise that is very adaptable. I always do it forwards and backwards because that's the space that I'm doing this in. But if I do it in other spaces, I might do it in a circle, I'll change direction. So the direction is governed by the stepping step. So I could, for instance, go here, I could turn this way. And I think, well, okay, there's a chair there, that's not too good, maybe I'll go this way. And so you can begin to play about with that exercise. And that adds other factors. So once again, when we do that, we're going to be kind of changing things slightly. Go back to your chair. So we learn to observe, and then we learn to go a little bit further, and we engage more with the different processes in the body. We observe, we become aware, and following that awareness comes our intent. And you know, it might be, you know, if it was why tape offers fruit, the intent here might be just let the chest contract. Or it might, could be lots of things, and so we begin to work out what the best way is to, in a sense, offer instructions to the body, not so much how to do things, but what to do in the first instance, and then observing how our body does what we want it to do, and working out which are the things that are most useful to it, as I said. So coming back to that position of equilibrium, where we can begin to calm the mind enough so that we settle into our body, so that we're aware of the body, not thinking about our body, although that may be part of the process, just a sense of stillness from which we can observe. I like the image that one of my teachers used of being on a hill and just looking out over a valley and just seeing the valley and getting a sense for the whole vista rather than specifics. You may choose to hone in on those specifics later. Now, let your hands drop down. So embrace tiger, return to mountain. And as we get caught up in details, how are the arms coming around and so on and so forth, we would lose that sense of the overall vista. Looking closely at something means it's quite difficult. We have a sense of the background, but we're not quite fully engaged with it, shall we say. But what we see in this exercise is there are those moments of punctuation, of settling here, for instance, where we go back to that whole vista and then we move out from it again. And this again is a characteristic patterning in Tai Chi, often described as expanding, contracting, yang to yin. One more time. And rest, and take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Just a reminder, there'll be no class next Tuesday. I'll do a recording of Thursday's class to put up on the internet as well. But there'll be no classes at all on Monday or Tuesday. But then we'll be more or less back to normal, although there's a bank holiday for Monday, but that won't affect this class. So that'll be something like the 22nd, is it? Something like that. Yes. Today's the 15th. Yes, so that'll be the 22nd. There's no class. I'll send an email out to remind people. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.